think, I'm sort of middle of the road, so luckily the job I did went all the way, this kind of went all the way up to the last minute. Hi, I'm Colby Parker Jr., ACE, and I'm here for an interview.
How did you start getting into editing?
In college, I learned a little bit, but I went to a state school in New York, and we didn't have film equipment. We only had video equipment. So what we do is we would shoot on film, but then we would have to digitize it down to tape, and I would edit linear on a Grass Valley or a Sony 450, and we would do cuts only editing. And we'd be put into groups to do films in groups of 6, and then we would do about 3 or 4 projects, and every project it would rotate. You'd produce, direct, edit, write, but I seemed to be the only person that could get a grasp of editing, so I ended up being the editor for everyone's projects, and I just kind of gravitated towards it. It was something my brain worked towards. I didn't mind having to watch the same thing 100 times over and over, and it kind of found me, I guess. I didn't really have a choice.
What was the transition from school into the industry like then?
I held a lot of jobs because people just don't hire an editor. You have to either be an apprentice on film. I was in New York, and so I became a PA, so I did a lot of PAing, and then I got a lot of internships, but they were for TV networks, so I was still far away from film, and I was kind of working more sports specific. I had gotten a internship at CBS Sports and then at USA Sports, which I don't think that network's around anymore. I got a job in the accounting room at an ad agency, and one day I went up and I saw they had a Sony 450 editing deck, and that's how they would edit their reels. They would do, when they did commercials, if they were going to go pitch for a car spot or something like that, they would put all the car commercials they'd done on a reel. So I told the guy, oh, that's I know how to work that machine. And he was like, amazing. I want to get bumped up to producer, so you're the new editor here. So I was cutting focus groups and other very rudimentary things, but I got sent on a run to a commercial editing house, and that was the first place I saw an Avid. And I was like, what is that? And they're like, this is an Avid. And it was the first time I had seen nonlinear editing, and I was like, oh my God. And I asked them for a job, and they hired me, and I was a runner there, and then I became an assistant editor. And then I had known a lot of music video directors living in New York and sort of hanging out in Coolsville. So I basically just ended up buying my own Avid, and I said, poof, I'm an editor, and basically just started cutting music videos, and I had cut about 100 music videos, and and the rest is history. And then I met Peter Berg, who was doing a Limp Bizkit video, and then he asked me to cut a TV show for him, and then he asked me to cut a movie for him.
Wow.
So I really stepped in shit, as they say.
I was wondering, do you have a music background?
I don't, and that's hurt me a lot. I would say it's been a struggle, and so later in life I started taking music lessons because I found the best editors have a music background, and you're always cutting to music, but you can't just slap the music in. You have to music edit a lot of things, and I didn't understand the terminology. People would be like, well, cut it on the one, and I never knew what that was. So I took guitar lessons and learned, how music is in, 4 notes or equal up a chord or something like that. But so because of that, I've gotten stronger. But yes, you really need, that's the first thing I tell people is really inundate yourself learning sound. All my assistants are very strong in sound because that's the one place I'm a little bit weaker in. I mean, I've gotten stronger over time and really disciplined myself to work with that, but you're going to be doing a lot of music editing, and the only way later on in life you'll see when you're trying to sell and edit, music and sound design have to be really on point. You can't tell somebody, I'm going to put in music later, or I'm going to make it sound better later, because nobody can picture an edit. You really, as I like to call it, you have to sprint to first base and really put your best foot forward.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in like a music family, and that's definitely one thing I noticed. I got like a comment back from one of my professors, like, why don't you try just listening to it and then cutting? And it makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
I had like no idea that it just, even I think the pacing of it makes me a lot more aware.
Yeah. And then when I'm working with composers, sometimes they'll be like, can you make this 8 frames longer so this can be cut on the 4th or the 8th? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever you need. But yeah, so it's like I said, it hurt me earlier in my career. And we have music editors that come on, but when you deliver your editor's cut, you're cutting the music yourself, and figuring out where to drop music out. And also, I'll reverb music, or you have to loop something because lyrics come in too soon. So it's up to you to do that all on your own in an antiquated state until you sort of get a composer in or a music editor's hired.
When they do music edits, is it like they write the music first and then go with the image, or the opposite of that?
What I'll get is a suite, so it could be a 30-second scene, but I have to pull 30 seconds of music from this 10-minute suite. The composers, or they will say, you didn't do such a good music edit and we want to redo it. And then sometimes they're like, oh, that's, that works. But also we'll get stems, and then, I'll go back to them and be like, can I get the stems to this? And I don't want all the instrumentation. I just want the percussive sound from here. And then second half, then I want to bring in the brass or the wood, or this is a sad scene, so I'm going to want to use the major notes or the minor notes. So each case is specific, but for the most part, yes, they'll usually redo it.
What makes the decision for when they use like licensed songs that are already there versus like...
Okay, so you also have music supervisors,
Mm-hmm.
and they're usually tastemakers, and they'll come in and watch a cut. Usually the editor at the editor's cut stage, which is basically when they're shooting the film, we're editing simultaneously, and it's called keeping up with camera. And then once they're done shooting or production's done, we get another week to deliver our editor's cut. So at that point, I'm just picking music and laying it in there. So I would say 50 to 60% of the time it's up to the editor to choose the music. Sometimes the director has songs in mind, like I'm sure Quentin Tarantino has that all mapped out, and he's a little bit more on point with that. And then we have music supervisors, but they usually come on a little bit later, and they usually will send them a scene, and then they'll send me a disc or a CD, or now it's a file, or they'll just send me a Dropbox file that has like 20 songs, and I choose from that. We've hired a bunch of KCRW DJs like Liza Richardson, Chris Doritas, and then there's another producer I work with, George Draculius, and they'll usually watch the film down, and then they just send you a handful of tracks they think that might work, and we just slap them on and watch them with the cut, and just sort of audition everything and give everything its day in court.
How long is like the post after all the camera wraps?
It depends if there's a release date booked. This film Gran Turismo, we had a release date locked in, so I think we had like 5 to 6 months, and that's usually the average. Usually it's a 10-month process, including production and shooting, and then we usually get 4 to 5 months after that.
how does it work with like all the CGI and stuff then? Is that like completely after or like during?
That's usually after. It's very expensive, so a lot of those scenes are pre-visualization or previs, and so we'll sort of send those out as early as possible, and then the visual effects will start trickling in, and then normally they've kind of decided, all right, they know which shots they want to use in the trailer, so we'll have to cut those scenes pretty early and get those out the box, out to ILM or who's ever in charge of doing the VFX, because they know they want to use that shot in the trailer. So the trailer shots will go out a lot earlier, and then it's, you know, it's it's sort of trial and error as we start editing the big VFX scenes, and then you sort of see that they've sort of over budgeted, and we see that we could pull some scenes out, and then the budget usually it becomes too expensive and we have to pull some scenes out. But that's something that happens, I say, during the editing process, because it's not a lot cut yet. So if you send it out too early, you'll be wasting money. So maybe at some point after the director's cut, we start sending them out. I did a Marvel movie, and Marvel has it locked in from the get-go. I got a previs, and I started to do some all edits, and they're like, no, this is what's budgeted, and this is exactly how it's going to look. And their previs shots are shot for shot. There's no dancing around that. So they've kind of got a system when it comes to the big visual effects scenes, and they spend a lot of time with pre-visualization. They hire a lot of huge amounts of previs artists, and those are mapped out very early.
I was wondering then, like as an editor, since you have so many different aspects from like the music to like the CGI and stuff, do you end up like knowing a lot about all those different aspects, or is it more?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because at some point when I've done a lot of big VFX jobs, every Friday, or there'll be a certain day where we do VFX, we'll sit in a room. Back in the day when they were on film, we would go to a screening room and do it. Now they send us files and we put them into the cut or into a computer. And, there's always a dialogue with the visual effects team and the visual effects supervisor, and you kind of learn different language, whether it's R&D or you reach a point where they'll do a grayscale version of VFX, and then if we're happy with it and want to move forward, we're like, all right, let's do a light pass, and that's when colors start coming in, and it's a more advanced process. But what you don't realize is like how much render time there is, because we do rendering in an Avid, and it's a couple hours or a couple seconds, but there's these big shots that actually take weeks to render because it's such high res 8K resolution, and so we do have to finish some of the big VFX shots. They're like, it's not about money anymore, it's about time. We don't have enough time to render these shots out for you guys, so you have to lock these sequences.
Wow. I mean, weeks
Yeah.
to render. I've never thought of that before, but
Yeah.
do you think that time will shorten with technology, or is it just necessary to get that quality?
Yeah, I think it's always, the technology is always improving and getting, I guess, stronger. But that said, then we're always working in higher resolutions at the same, I've gone from working in 1080 to now 8K, and so, yeah, it just seems as the technology improves, so does, the resolution of what we're working in.
How do you stay like updated with all of the different it feels like every couple months there's like something new, or like a new technology or something to use?
We're inundated with it. It's talked about in the room. You ask questions. I mean, there's a lot I don't know. But, the stuff I do want to know, I have to ask questions. But I mean, these films are enormous. We're talking about, $100, $200 million films, and there's giant teams. But it's just through osmosis of being around these different parts of the post process. As I'm doing a scene, you'll have questions, and I'll ask the visual effects team, how is this done? And you just learn. I've done a lot of films where they've just created software for the film we were doing, whether it was Deepwater Horizon or this film Battleship. They had just created a new software to create CGI water. But I would say it's through osmosis, and it's up to you as an individual. I mean, you can go past this and be like, I don't really care how it's done. Don't tell me how the sausage is made, but you just need a curious mind. It's up to the individual.
Is AI prevalent in editing too now?
I don't know. It could be, right?
I mean, I still use Premiere and stuff, and there is the smart edits, but it's nowhere at the level of where I think it would replace editors yet. But
I don't. I mean, I guess if you wanted a very sort of bland vanilla edit, you could get it. But everything comes down to taste and style, and I just don't. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, how it could do. I can't wrap my head around it being able to tell a story and choose between takes, because it comes down to taste, and
yeah,
a lot of editing is triage, I'm sure, when you started editing. So a lot of it is just trying to piece it together and make things work. And I'm stealing audio from different parts and stealing a look. I'm really exhausting all my footage. So I just don't know how the AI could figure that out yet.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Which is good news.
I mean, I wouldn't mind hiring AI and having it do I'm sure you could do a basic, straightforward edit maybe, but you would always need somebody with some taste and a vision to come in and make it work.
I mean, is the technology being used to sort through different takes and files? Because I could see it being able to do that aspect possibly.
I haven't come across it in my field yet. Even when I think there is something that's kind of intuitive where it could sync up if you have the WAV file, it could sync up some footage, which was a little tricky, because you had to iMatch it. But even when I do script sync, I have to have an assistant sort of. It's basically data entry, and they just kind of have to manually put it in, because again, you have to have a film intuition to understand, because a lot of times when you're doing script sync, the director will be like, all right, do it again, and now have to know there's an alt. So it really has to be organized and labeled a certain way so that you could find what you're looking for. So I just don't know if editing's just not sort of as rote and mechanical as that. And it feels like with the writing, it's sort of binary, and it can kind of steal from other writings, but I think editing's a little too intricate.
Yeah. I was wondering, so I think there's the beginning intro where it feels almost more documentary style, because it starts with I guess where they filmed it in the Gran Turismo, and then it goes into the story. When it's so diverse styles, how do you transition?
I mean, that's my style. I mean, since my first films, I've had sort of a cinema verite docu style. But again, my job is to get the director's vision on screen, and so I'm always having the director sort of map out or explain to me his vision and what he wants to see. This director, Neil Blomkamp, was a fan of Deepwater Horizon and Ant-Man, so that was the styles he said I want to see it in that style. So it's the language of film that I work with. So it's just my taste and my style. But I grew up watching a lot of NFL films and so that sort of informed my style a lot, I would say, where they do a lot of what I call cubist style, where they kind of repeat a shot but from different angles. And then, to get the docu style, it has to be shot that way. And it's just a lot of search and destroying. There's no easy way around it. You just got to go through every frame of the film. That's how I do it. I kind of inundate myself with the film. It's a lot of late hours, and I work and I make select reels. I make very specific select reels, the shots I like, and then I try never to go back to the main dailies, and I try and pull from my select reel. And a lot of the films I do, especially I've done a bunch of sports or films that have montages. When you get into a montage there, the music can do a lot of the work and heavy lifting for you, and then it doesn't have to be that linear. I don't really like to be completely linear. I always kind of want to be a note off. I guess it's just a style I like. Sometimes I work with directors who want to be more straightforward and more linear, and I can conform my style to that if need be. But the footage will always speak to you and tell you what to do. And then, like I said before off camera, a lot of editing is triage, and so it's a lot of we don't have this scene where this exposition's told, so you're stealing scenes all the time or shots from other scenes and adding ADR or dialogue to create a scene and build the exposition you need. So it's not black or white as far as when I go in the cut. I have a style, but like I said, the footage speaks to you. There's a script, there's storyboards, and that's sort of the jump off point, and then you go from there.
I was wondering, was that like planned to kind of start it out that way and then go into the story? Or
How did the movie start? I don't even remember.
It's like, I think it starts with like they're in like Japan, and it just shows like how they do.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that was very controversial. So because this is a big gamer specific game and movie, the director really felt that we had to pay homage to this Kazunori, who is a celebrity in his own right. So that was scripted, but it was 5 or 6 different individual scenes, and it was like we kind of I turned that into a 2 to 3 minute montage, and then the studio wasn't a fan of it, so that note had come back, but the director always wanted it, so we had done a million iterations of that, and then finally we got to the point where it was just sort of a quick 30-second adrenaline hit, and because then we go really into story. At one point it had left, and I actually pleaded with the director. I was like, this is a movie for gamers and kids, and I was just like, I think we want to come in hard on the film with a little adrenaline rush before we have these talky scenes. And so it was also a matter of pacing, because we had all these big dialogue scenes, and normally action films like this will start off with a big set piece and then hit you with some expositional scenes. So I think it was a case of pacing and paying homage and respect to the gamers and the gamer culture.
The other thing I really noticed is, like you were mentioning about the music, like even the sound of like the cars or like the engines could lead to a cut.
The less music you use, the more impactful it is when you do use it. So you definitely have to be judicious where you use it. But these are just tricks I've learned along the way of editing. There's always a place where you could drop the music out and then have it slam back in. So a lot of times it's, when do I need another burst or another impactful edit. And then specifically to this film, what I wanted to do is I wanted to get you inside of Jan's head. The stuff I'm most proud of is when I would drop out all the music and sound and just hear his breathing and the voices, which is his pit crew or his engineers talking to him. And so that's something I wanted to do. I wanted to really put you in Jan's POV. This is a gamer who's now gone into a real race car, and a lot of the stuff in the script had spoken to the power of the car and and Jan being a little bit overpowered and by being in the car. So I kind of wanted to put you in the driver's seat and feel what he was feeling.
I think it makes sense when you said your background in sports, because it
Mm-hmm.
does really capture that like high adrenaline and like the racing feels. But I was wondering, like, how do you balance between like, I guess, the mood of it, so when it's like such high adrenaline to not just, you know.
There's this comes down to pacing, but too much action. I've cut a lot of fight scenes. I cut a lot of sports scenes. Too much of that, and the audience gets desensitized. So it's all about pacing and watching and reviewing, and you have to watch these scenes down. You have to watch, and you can't just watch a scene down. You have to watch it from second one all the way through, because you'll feel different after watching 45 minutes of the film, and then you get to a big race scene. To just watching the race scene in a vacuum may work. So it's a lot of trial and error and taste, and you have to give your audience a break here and there too. You just can't bombard them with sounds and noise, because like I said, they'll get desensitized and it'll just be a big blur.
How do you pace jump cuts, because without making it seem like it's either too little of it or too much?
Jump cut sound is really important. You'll be surprised what a little sound effect of a mini whoosh or a suck out, or a whoosh. All those things really help camouflage the jump cut. Again, it comes down to taste, but earlier in my career, everything was super linear, and I find when I work with first-time directors or beginning directors, everything's linear and they're worried about eye lines and all that. And then as you go on and you preview so many cuts for audiences, you're learning like they're not worried about that nuance. It's a broader thing of a mood, a feeling, and the story and character. And so whatever I can do to get to these more impactful shots or reactions or action scene, I think that's what sticks with an audience. And if you can separate yourself and not worry about being what other filmmakers will think about it, but how something will impact your audience, you'll learn that you can get away with that. But again, sound will really help camouflage that. Whether it's a click or whatever is around the scene, like an engine rev, and all of a sudden I can get away with a jump cut. Or sometimes you add a 10% where like it's a punch in now, so it's not a straight jump cut because I'm punching in 10 more 10% tighter on the shot, and now the audience's eyes know to go there, and now I'm telling story. I'm like, look here, this is important. So everything's in service of the story as well. And so that's, again, it's the footage talking to me, and the story I'm trying to tell leads me to do it. And sometimes it just looks cool.
Definitely in this movie too. Then I was wondering, like, are there a lot of like continuity stuff that when you're editing you also have to deal with, or like try?
I don't worry about continuity. I guess it's the directors I work for, but again, I think continuity is maybe amateur filmmakers are worried about that. For me, and this is my personal preference. Continuity is definitely important, but I don't think you need to get hung up on that. I think, like I said, if sometimes you just sneak in a quick jump cut here or there and it's telling the story, and that's the most important thing. So yes, continuity is important, but I wouldn't get hung up on it. Your audience isn't getting hung up on it. I've done over 5,000 screenings with audiences, and nobody cares about continuity.
I think the scene it goes to like the 4 different perspectives, so I think it's like Jan's and then his coaches and then like the Danny character. And when it's such like, in a way, different stories happening, like how do you mesh them together?
Yeah, you struggle with that in the edit. but then the audiences again are very forgiving as far as movie time. And so early on in my career, I was always worried about like, well, this reaction's already happened. Um, and if I played this in real time, but you find that you get away with it. And again, the audience, if they're engrossed, they're not worried about like, why is this person reacting 5 seconds later than the Danny character or the Orlando Bloom character. I think, again, the emotion, the most impactful reaction or emotional shot is what's important, and that's what you do. And the audience will let you get away with using movie time as opposed to perfect reality time. It's not a reality show. It's a film, and so what your job is to tell the story and use the best reaction shots possible to create emotion and to stir something in your audience.
When you have like these different characters and emotions, are they usually within the script and like planned out, or is that really like after you have the editor's cut and is like, oh, maybe if we put them together this way?
The reaction shots and all that usually aren't in the script. That and even the montages, it'll just say montage. There's 5 races they filmed, and it's enough already. You gotta let the audience go home, or else I'll have a 5-hour movie. So, I'm at the point where I could say, oh, let me try a montage. Let me conflate all these scenes and tell the story that way. It doesn't have to be linear. When they're shooting, say, again, as to use sports as an example, for crowd or reaction shots, or say the mother or father in the stands, they're going to shoot the father. All right, you're happy. All right, you're sad. All right, there was a crash. All right, he won. They'll shoot all that in one take. And so you're going back and picking through that too. So it's not in the script, and it's not shot in a linear fashion. And then sometimes I'm stealing a shot, in between a take. The actor is just waiting for them to yell action, and he looks more concerned than he did when the director said look pensive. So you're always stealing shots and digging through, and then you don't know where you're going to get the better reaction shots. And also what the script doesn't realize is you have to keep certain characters alive during your film. It's like, I haven't seen the dad in almost 20 minutes, or I haven't seen this character, and you need to keep characters alive. So again, that's rewatching the film, screening it, taking notes, and seeing, emotionally, viscerally what's affecting you and what's not working, and what you need. And then sometimes you just need a cutaway because you don't want to do a jump cut with your actors or something, or you want to stick a ADR line, or you need a time passage. And so you use these reaction shots that weren't scripted to advance the story.
I was wondering though, most times if there's like, let's say you pulled from something else, do they end up like ADRing that, or is it like you just steal like some audio from somewhere else?
Both. Yeah, both. Normally you'll have to, whenever you could save production, it sounds better. ADR, it's not shot in the same location, so it's always going to raise a lantern to it, and people may notice it. So I'm always trying to steal different production lines, all the sound effects. I'm always, while I'm pulling selects, if I hear a good screech or a car rev in the production, I'll put that in a bin and just say car rev or whatever, anything, or a scream or a piece of dialogue. We're always trying to repurpose the production sounds and production dialogue.
There's so many of the shots where it's like he's playing at the video game, and then suddenly he's like in that imaginary car or like on the racetrack, and then changing into that.
It was in the script once, and then we just started to put it in more and just see how much we could get away with using it. It just, aesthetically, it just looked super cool.
Yeah.
It really paid homage to the video game, and in a way it kind of felt like that was Jan's POV and how he was using his gaming skills to beat the real race car drivers, or how to stay afloat within that race car world. And it was just Victor Muller was our VFX supervisor, and we went back and forth with him. We're like, we wanted it to feel like the video game, and so we did an antiquated version of it, and then we passed it to him, and he was able to make it seem as photoreal as possible.
Was there ever like a challenge between choosing to use like the VFX versus real?
No, we just had done it a little too much, and then it took a little bit of the impactfulness away from the third act sort of final sequence where he uses it to pass Kappa and finish in third place in the race and reach the podium. So we had exhausted it a few too many times, so when it happened in the final act, it was like, oh, that gag again. So we had to pull back and save a few of the of that technique for the final race.
I guess that goes back to like your thing about pacing it out too.
Yeah, too much. It's definitely these films. It's like I said, you go through and these things are crafted, and you have to. There's a lot of give and take, and you just have to find the right balance.
And then this is kind of a more personal question, but when you were going into editing it, did you like have to play the game to kind of get the feel of it, or do you have any experience with cars? Because as a viewer, I was like, you really brought me into that like feeling of it.
No, I'm a terrible driver. I'm terrible at these POV first-person video games. I'm really bad at all. I'm like, we had a Gran Turismo rig, and I literally could do one turn, and I was in the wall, and I couldn't get off the wall. And I find I find people without a knowledge are better, because I co-edited a few sports films, and I found like the editors who knew nothing about the sports, they came at it from a different perspective, and they weren't so hung up on all the specifics of like the in-between moments and just just the facts, or just the shots that tell the story the best. We don't need to see first down, second down, third down. We just need to see the big play, and then keep it moving.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but I guess it's like you have the general audience perspective into it too.
Yeah.
And then I was just wondering, like, when you get into these films, like obviously there's the director, and are there any involvement with like sponsors and stuff? Because there were so many like different brands that were showcased in the film.
Beforehand, you get the rights. So I forget the name of I think it was a Ferrari that crashes. So they had asked specifically to say it wasn't a technical malfunction. It was a driver malfunction for the reason for the crash. So there was a few things like that where they didn't want to take the blame for the crashes as far as like a mechanical thing within, their cars. So that things like that happen, because it is a real life story. A lot of times we let the people the story's based on watch the films and sort of sign off and give their approval. I'm a little specific because I've done Lone Survivor, Friday Night Lights, Deepwater Horizon, Patriots Day. These are all films based on true stories, and on all of them, the real people are always invited in to watch and give their approval. I mean, we didn't have to take out anything they said they didn't want, but we'd listen and we'd hear them out, and a few times we would change a scene here and there, and sometimes they're like, we're sorry, but this is, the way it's going to be.
Then I guess more specific, when you work with like directors and all these different things, how do you balance like getting the feedback but then still like maintaining like your style? Or
nobody wants a robot. I mean, you'll know if the director just wants you to do exactly what he says, and if a director asks me to do something, I do it. I can't say, oh, I tried it, it didn't work. They'll want to see it. But I'm also hired for my taste. Anybody could hire a button pusher to do exactly what the script says. So I'm always trying to wow them. I'm always trying to impress them. And, I'm always trying to do, a more subversive edit than what was on the page. And if a director, a lot of times a director will say, okay, this is what I was looking for, but I love this, let's pull it back a bit, and I mean, that's a win for me. Though what I don't want to hear is that they're bored and be like, can you make it move more? I don't want anyone to ever say that. I think that's the biggest crime to say for me, is for somebody to say, they're bored, or it's too slow. Can you pace it up a bit?
And then I guess this would be just more like a hypothetical question, but and just to get like your perspective on it. So I have like this like pitch competition where I like submit, there's like short like ad blurbs you would submit, and then it goes into like this judging. And so I've gotten like feedback from it from like 2 different people like in the program, but it's like very contrasting feedback, and then you're supposed to like submit it, and then it's like another panel of judges. And I'm just not sure like if you were in like this position, how would you like kind of receive the feedback to kind of like obviously take it in, but also like put your best foot forward, since they're not the ones judging and it's like a whole different panel of people judging.
Sometimes I find a little will go a long way. Even with notes I get, sometimes I just do a little piece of the note, and the people, they're pleased with what I've done. I'm like, I could have done more. They're like, no. It's so I think, don't try and be so literal when you get a note like that, and try and read between the lines and take a piece of all those notes and again conflate it, but don't let it overtake the whole idea. I think it's a suggestion, and obviously in an edit room where I work, the best idea always wins. And so I would say, you're only going to find it if you, through the work and exploring and doing different iterations of it. So, I would take the note, give it its day in court, and then, it doesn't have to, suffocate the whole presentation that you're doing. Maybe just take a small piece of each idea, and then, let it be a hybrid of all these ideas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I mean, like I've gotten different feedback and stuff, but mostly it's just been like, oh, just be glad you got notes. So
yeah,
it was good to get your perspective on that too. And I was wondering a little bit, since you have worked in ads, like I have gotten a note to be like more realistic, but then it's targeted towards like a younger audience. So like I think 15 to 25, and they said make sure it's also like within that age range and would be appealable to them. I guess since you like the documentary style, like how do you balance the like realism with also like obviously it's something different from the everyday?
How do I balance that?
Or
I mean, I'm not young anymore, so I would put it in front of a young person's eyes and get notes from them, or, like you said, all these films that you see, they're put in front of audiences, and commercials are put in front of focus groups. So, yeah, you got to get feedback, and then, early on you have perspective, and always try and remember what moved you early, or what was the most impactful part of what you were working on early, because you're going to lose perspective at some point. But you just have to get feedback and trust your gut, and try and remember what it's like to be young, or try and guess what it's like to be old. I mean, I'm kind of lacking a little bit of context with this note, with this question, so it's a little difficult. I mean, but I don't know. That's watch, and then watch other spots, and watch lots of movies, and watch lots of commercials. I watch a lot of movies and TV shows, and just I'm always sort of picking and remember something. If I see something I really like, I'll take a note, or I'll digitize that, and I have a folder with all like different cuts or different things that I appreciate that have moved me.
yeah, I mean, I love watching Super Bowl ads. So like I'm the one that'll have playlists, so that's like my fun pastimes.
Yeah, they're good.
Thank you. I guess kind of coming to a close, what would be like your advice?
Let's see. Stay humble. Always keep working, especially early on in your career, and just remember, everyone has different tastes. That's why there's chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla.
I think that's like, did you like practice that or something? That was perfect.
I say that a lot in the edit room. Just everyone's got different tastes. I'm used to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It gets overwhelming.
It's amazing, like your journey from kind of cutting films and then starting like in that accounting and then getting to like this, but I think it's really inspiring, and I really appreciate you coming to like talk about it and stuff too.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. It's paying it forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.